Hi, I'm Mark Yerpe, VP of Global Revenue at Intento, and I'm extremely pleased to welcome you all to Intento's inaugural webinar, the Enterprise Machine Translation Playbook 2022-2023. As many of you know, Intento spends a great deal of time and effort educating the global business community about machine translation strategies and best practices. 2022 saw us release our 6th annual State of Machine Translation Report, the industry benchmark for engine evaluation. And in the past 2 years, we presented at over 30 conferences and to over 5,000 attendees. When I joined the company 2 years ago, most people didn't know what Intento did. We've worked hard to change that, and today's webinar feels sort of like a big housewarming party, inviting all our friends over to see what we've built. So we've got over 450 registrants for this webinar from a wide range of regions, industries, and companies. And Intento and our Enterprise Machine Translation Hub is now not just known, but relied upon and trusted by the world's largest companies to enable massively multilingual communication at scale. We're honored to have many of our customers and industry peers presenting with us, including AstraZeneca, Esri, Gap, Netapp, Nike, Procore, Stripe, and Wish. What a group. They have a wealth of localization and machine translation experience, and we're so thankful that they're here to share their expertise with us today. Today's program starts with a keynote presentation by Konstantin Savenkov, Intento's co-founder and CEO, followed by our first panel discussion around the value of MT across the enterprise. This will be followed by a short session on image generators, and our second panel will cover the latest machine translation topics and trends and what to expect from MT in 2023. Finally, just a bit of housekeeping. For the attendees, please submit your questions during the various presentations, and they'll be answered at the end of each session. And there'll be a small gift related to our image generator session sent to each person whose question is selected to be answered. So warm up those questions. With that, we're ready to kick things off. Konstantin, please join me on the stage. Konstantin is the CEO and co-founder of Intento. He and I first met 2.5 years ago when Intento announced it had raised its seed funding. And I reached out cold to Konstantin on LinkedIn and I said, "What's your North American growth plan?" About a month later, I became Intento's first employee in the Americas. I'm now head of global sales and revenue for Intento, and I'm really glad I joined our company. It's been a fabulous trip. So Konstantin has a PhD in computer science and worked in academia and served in a number of executive roles before co-founding Intento in 2016 at the Berkeley Skydeck Accelerator. A lot has happened since those early days at Berkeley, with Intento now approaching 100 employees around the globe, serving the world's largest companies, organizations, and governments. With that, Konstantin, the floor is yours for today's keynote presentation.
Thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. So I'm thrilled to see so many people in the room. We're coming to the end of a very complex year for us humans, with war in Ukraine and economic turbulence all over the world. Nevertheless, it was a fascinating year for machine translation and AI. It cannot solve all our human problems, but, well, at least not yet. But it helps a lot in many cases. And soon we'll start those two interesting panel discussions. Before that, I just want to briefly share with you things which I've seen interesting this year, and things which worked, ideas which worked. And also, I want to show some things which look promising for the next year. And perhaps they will resonate with something you have in mind. And this type of alignment is what we need to make the future now. So first, things which worked this year. Last couple of years, people have been discussing use of massively multilingual models for machine translation. And the idea is very simple: to build a model where different languages live together and boost each other, much like, when we humans learn a language, all of the languages are in our brain. And when we learn a new one, it's it's easier and easier and boost all others we know. And this year we've seen such models published by Netapp for machine translation, no language left behind. This model is called, but what I think is even more important, a few machine translation providers started to use them in production. And this resulted in unprecedented growth of the support language pairs for machine translation. In our annual State of the Machine Translation study in September, we registered an increase from 100,000 supported language pairs last year to 125,000 this year. And in total, in September, all MT providers combined supported more than 680 languages. And just 2 last months after we ran the report, another 100 new languages were added to machine translation, mostly by Google, Newtrans, and Alibaba, which is terrific. And you may think that maybe those are small languages, and from the enterprise perspective, they don't bring much revenue, but for the people speaking those languages, adding them to machine translation basically opens the whole world. And this is extremely important. So second thing I want to mention, we had an idea about a year ago, what if we run certain analysis of post-editor activities, maybe we'll be able to find many interesting things about how localization stack is set up. And we started to run this type of analysis at scale about a year ago, which is analysis of what post editors do with different types of leverage, translation memory matches, repetitions, machine translation. We call it a checkup because this type of analysis shows symptoms of issues in different parts of the localization stack, including things like over-editing, under-editing in some of the projects, misconfigured software, connectors, and things like that. And we know that localization stack is very complex. So very often a problem deep inside of the system is not visible. It just results in some 20-30% more money spent on the same job for no apparent reason. And so we started to run it. We've seen cases where this type of analysis uncovers up to 60% of wasted effort. For example, where repetitions are not set up properly in TMS and people edit over and over, same machine translation. And another big outcome which we see is we have very, very visible and tangible proof that good machine translation needs less edits than TM fuzzy matches. How it looks, typically we see something like this picture with how different leverage types compared by the effort put by post editors. Then after certain issues fixed in TMS side, we see how fuzzy matches take less edits. And then when MT is optimized, it typically goes below, mid, and low fuzzies. And then it enables very open conversation with an LSP to suggest replacing low fuzzies with machine translation, and at the same time suggesting that probably this machine translation post editing should not be more expensive because it clearly takes less effort. So that's for us, it's a very important idea that worked this year because it enables very tangible ROI from optimizing machine translation. Then third, this year we ran the first experiments of using machine translation plus speech synthesis for translating corporate training videos for some of the customers. This is a complex picture. The main idea of this picture is just the workflows for video translation are very complex, and we found right points of integration into those complex workflows involving many parties, companies, LSPs which do translation, companies which create training content, companies who do voiceover. And overall, as we presented at a few conferences this year, we see about 65% effort savings in total, which is quite a lot in terms of money, but what is most important, it saves lots of time because just something which previously took 1 year now can be done in just a month. Then next idea, it's not a production idea, but we ran a very interesting study with one of the customers related to source quality improvement. What's that about is that, as you may know, every text may be translated in many different ways into another language. But what is less obvious, actually, for the same text, there may be very different source sentences. And the question, then if you have different source sentences resulting in them translating the same sentence, then if you apply machine translation to them, you will receive text in target language on a different distance from your desired translation. And the question was, can we find such a transformation of the source text so that it results in machine translation, which is the closest to the desired output? So around this study, we found a few ways to do this transformation. We see that it requires about 15% less post-editing, and we definitely will be exploring this going forward. The very important idea is that the way workflows built today, all editing happens typically after machine translation. And it seems that for many cases, bringing it before machine translation may yield significant value. Then there are a few things which we see may work efficiently in the next year. One of them, which we discussed a lot at one of the workshops last cohort, is centralization versus sharing in terms of the managing localization in the enterprise. And the idea is that if you look, translation is not the only thing which is done by a localization department, right? It's also about working with source quality. It's doing post-editing, checking quality of the translations, project management, and many, many other things. And human workflows require centralization. However, when we put automation, we suddenly require less centralization. And what's possible to do is to share these assets, AI assets, across a company by directly integrating those tools for machine translation and automated post-editing with the tools used across the company in other departments, in customer service, in HR, in corporate training, and so on. So what we see that moves costs closer to where ROI is generated, and it solves this problem that, for example, during budget cuts, the costs of the localization departments are reduced, and it prevents other departments to boost revenue by increasing the amount of translations. And also we see that it creates more ownership. So we see this trend enabled by technology. Hopefully we'll see it more and more next year, and hopefully it will help many companies to cope with economic downturn. Second trend, which we see related to, second idea, related to using AI for beyond machine translation. And we see it in the following way, that when machine translation used for localization department, it's pretty much everything which is required. Other processes, as we discussed, done by people. When machine translation being spread across the company, suddenly those other processes became bottlenecks because there's no people to run them if the translation is done right, for example, in the customer service system. and it may overturn this single leg table. And we see that in those cases, those other things done by people, they become bottlenecks when machine translation is good enough. And we see for that automatic translation working across the enterprise, this table needs more legs. We need source quality improvement, automatic post-editing, and translation quality estimation. And we already have parts of that on our platform. That's what enables, say, real-time automatic translation for customer service. It's almost impossible to do without ability to automatically post-edit translation for tone of voice and sometimes gender. And we'll see it more and more next year. And finally, big news of the last few weeks is release of a new version of GPT, which you may have seen in many social media through its conversational version, which is ChatGPT. Actually, there are lots of those general pre-trained transformers, and there are just few of them. It's a screenshot from one of the articles. They're currently in next model released. And those are not only massively multilingual models, those are models which are capable of doing lots of tasks besides translation. And if you think all those other tasks people are doing in the localization process, such ones we mentioned, they also can be done using those models. For example, it may be automatic source quality improvement by disambiguating text and making it more sensible and more translatable. It also may be automatic post editing. It also may be changing style of the text as desired. And it's quite, let me see if I have it. Yeah, so what's important about those models is that they enable a very convenient way of going to production, starting from what's called zero-shot training, when you just express what needs to be done with your text. Then when you start using it, you start getting few examples of what needs to be improved. You can improve it right on these few examples. And over time, as you got more and more data, you can do fine-tuning in a similar way how you fine-tune, say, Google AutoML Translate with your translation memory. We see this will transform the industry a lot because it enables everyone to use AI not only for this simple translation, but also for a host of other tasks linguists are doing. And what's great about that, since we at Intento have connectors to probably all TMS systems, around 16 or 17 of them, early next year we'll be enabling the use of this type of technology in all TMS systems. So this way you will be able to build quite complex workflow based on those artificial linguists, reviewers, post editors, and we hope that it will reduce effort of creating high quality content even further from like maybe 70%, which you can get today using post editing versus human translation, to probably 80 or 90%. Thank you. That's all ideas I got today. I hope we'll have time over the holiday season to think about all of them, and we'll start next year with lots of exciting initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Konstantin. Lots of interesting topics indeed. For our first panel, we're going to have joining me on stage, Zach Duncan, Localization Program Manager at Stripe, Brock Hansen, Globalization Programs and Solutions Manager at Wish, Theresa Heim-Stohler, Senior Ops Manager, Localization and Vendor Management from Nike, and Pascale Tremblay, Director of Localization from Gap. They're going to be participating in our first panel, which is entitled Demonstrating MT's Value Across the Enterprise. And Paulina Perepelkin, Intento's West Coast Territory Manager, will be moderating the panel. So Paulina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mark. Everybody, it's such a pleasure to see you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. And as I'm going to ask you a question, if you don't mind spending about 30 seconds letting us know a little bit about your background, maybe if, when you got started with machine translation first, maybe initial use cases, or whatever else you'd like to share for about 30 seconds. And Pascale, this first question will be to you. So get ready. How would you describe machine translation's biggest impact or value in your organization?
Hi, Paulina. Hi, everyone. If we get started and we look into GAP's context in terms of machine translation, it's been an interesting journey. GAP has some very highly specialized content. So we started to look into MT and MT models quite a few years ago, but unfortunately, it was not very successful. And I would say probably the output at first was mediocre at best. And what we were experiencing is it was getting costly and it was taking a long time because the output we were getting, we had to retranslate, then it was taking much longer. So this is where we were finding ourselves several years ago. So while we couldn't implement machine translation, we definitely kept abreast of what was happening. And then I would say about 2.5 years ago, we were challenged to deploy a huge project. And there was not much time. The scope was incredibly big. And we had several types of content. We had e-learnings, job aid, communications, platform customization, translation to perform, and so on. And the word count in all languages was humanly impossible to do. So, and at the time, we didn't have a strategy or a model in place to address. But with this constraint of the scope and what we needed to do to be successful, we didn't have a choice. So we decided to take a risk and do machine translation and also partner with a new vendor for translation that were experienced with machine translation. So while it was highly risky for many different reasons, and we were completely novice in working with machine translation, we did learn a lot, and the project was highly successful because we were able to deliver good quality, and the feedback we received from our teams, or because it was internal, from the internal team, was incredible. And so 2.5 years ago, to give a little bit of context, was all about inclusion. It was the pandemic. And so there was definitely some different levels of appreciation from a communication perspective. So that really brought us into our more focused now and strategized journey with machine translation. So once we did this project, then it unlocked for us, the promise of machine translation has always been scalability and cost efficiency. But how do you realize those two major points with machine translation? So by doing this first project, where yes, we encountered several obstacles, it was not an easy project, but with the success and the unlock of the scalability, then we realized how much more we could do with maybe less resources or with the same amount. So when you present it to your leaders and such, it has been a high success because, which leader isn't happy to hear you can do a lot more with either less or the same resources? But so we started partnering with Intento about 2 years ago. We started developing a model, And so this first two proposition, we put this in place, and we had a smaller work stream, I would say, to look into what are the biggest value for the enterprise. And at the same time, what we realized as we were developing this model, then other work stream started to reach out to us. So while we were developing our models, the company continued to transform and use more AI in a different capacity. So they reached out, and while we were we had this initial small scale to develop MT, it turned out to be much bigger as we started this first project. And I would say there are three other components for us that are highly valuable for the company and for the proposition of MT and AI in general. And I would say it really helps us facilitate the communication, not only with employees, but also with our customers. And this facilitation also provide more flexibility. So when you start implementing machine translation with our chatbots, whether it's for employees or customers, then you provide a lot more flexibility to your customer support team, your tech support team, because, well, if they do not have a speaker of one language, well, we can turn on the machine translation. So you ensure constant communication, which is a big unlock for some of our teams. And then I would say also, now that, as we continue to learn and specialize and deploy more and more, what has been amazing is this new proposition that our team can also adapt and provide a driving influence on other business cases. So while we do specialize in language, and because we've had to integrate and also educate our business partners with AI and language AI, then we are being pulled at different capacity within the enterprise to say like, oh, so how do you orchestrate and how do you place the human in the loop? So I think while our initial scope when we started machine translation was very specific to translation, for us, the journey has been incredible because it has also unlocked other possibilities, not only for our team, but also to work across the enterprise and really, really drive scalability, speed, and also communications.
Wow, that's really fascinating to hear. Thank you so much, Pascale, for that story of how MT is really growing within your organization from that initial impact to impact with other teams as well. That's really exciting. Thank you. Zach, my next question is going to be to you. And how do you work currently with other departments to measure the value of machine translation and prove the ROI? And if you don't mind giving a little bit, that 30-second background on you as well, that would be fantastic. Thanks.
Thanks, Paulina, and thanks, Intento, for having me on this webinar. So a little by background, I've been in the industry for about a decade now. I've been dabbling in MT, experimenting in the field for about 5 years or so. I've worked on both the client side and vendor side, though most recently it's been client for the last few years. Circling back to the question, how do you work with departments to measure the value of MT? And for me, it's setting the conversation to really show that MT is opening doors that the traditional models really were not able to check the box for. And what I mean by this is the concept of being able to process basically content with pennies on the dollars versus what we were seeing a decade ago is opening up new fields. It's opening up new realms to where we can actually not just prove ROI by saying we translate into 1x more language, but by opening complete new possibilities, much like Pascale was just noting on. So this brings us closer to core business functionality to where we can, let's say we can work with operations to provide support in languages we weren't able to do in the past. by providing that new service, you're no longer moving the needle by 1 or 2%, but you're actually kind of completely changing the conversation of what the localization department's able to provide. And I really think that's where the core value of where localization can, when we talk about MT, that's really the core value, I think, over the next 5 years that a central localization team can provide. It's just opening up new possibilities for other teams outside that didn't exist before.
Okay, wonderful. That's a really interesting perspective to kind of see how it impacts other different teams as well. Does anybody want to jump in and maybe add your own perspective of how do you work with other departments to measure the value of MT? Maybe Brock, do you have anything to add on this bit?
Yeah, it's interesting because as you look at localization, it's oftentimes seen as a factor. It's really hard to pinpoint that ROI. So I think for us, we always have to be very careful in how you measure what you're doing so that you can be able to present that.
No, that makes absolute sense. Anybody else? Yep, go ahead.
I agree with that, Brock. I think it's a trap. If you go to other teams, they have their own core functionality. They're working on something that's amazing. If we go to them and say, we're responsible for 20% of your ROI, that's not going to fly. But if we go to them and say, we're going to enable you to reach a new customer base, all of a sudden it flips the conversation and they're telling other people we enabled their ROI. So it flips it on its, which is amazing.
Yeah, it gives them a scale that they didn't have before that then allows you to reference back to what you did, and you have to try to measure that. That's the tricky part, right? I think everybody challenges with trying to say, this is the exact impact. But if you talk like you said, Zach, we opened and helped you enter this market that you've already done this amazing product, you can move to there. It makes it easier.
Yeah. And Pascale, did you have many discussions around the ROI as MT was growing within your company?
We are still working on it because, as I was explaining earlier, as we started to unlock one of our work stream in content type to work with machine translation, several others have just popped. And so as we're working all together and implementing now, this coming year is going to be about showing the ROI and really showing the data of what we can do with machine translation. And I think another point, and I love to hear that what we're experiencing at the Gap is something that Zach is also experiencing at Stripe. And I think an additional point is that our language expertise that we do have is also translating to other departments. So as other teams are developing personalization, and several vendors come in and they do have that language component, then these teams find themselves a little bit at loss in terms of, so what do we do with that language component, whether it's the translated part or even the English, because when you generate English, you still need to have some validation of the content because it's most of the time it can just be generated and it's good to go. So now, that's an example of how we are being leveraged too, like not just for the translation piece, but also like, so what do we do with the source? And also, as Konstantin was talking earlier, it's about how do we work with our business partner to create a source that can be plugged into so many tools, actually.
No, absolutely. That makes sense. And Theresa, anything to add from your perspective on really measuring that value of machine translation?
Yeah, we actually do go through that process of, calculating how much money is saved by removing that translation phase. But to be honest, for Nike, more important than the saved money is the fact that we can have much quicker turnaround times for the content that is MT'd. And that's always a little bit difficult to calculate an ROI on. But it is by far the most important factor for us. Just the fact that we could reduce turnaround time from 72 to 48 hours, for example.
No, absolutely. And that completely makes sense how for a very consumer-oriented brand, where fashion brands, where that speed to market is just immense value. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for your input on this question. Next one, Theresa, actually goes right to you. And if you could please share maybe what are some of the internal objections around machine translation that you've overcome, and how did you overcome those objections?
Great. Thanks, Pauline. And hi, everybody. My name is Theresa Heim-Stohler, and I'm the operations manager for the localization and quality team at Nike. I've been with the company for about 6.5 years now. In terms of our background in MT, we've had it in our ecosystem for about 5 years. But interestingly enough, our implementation has not changed very much during that time. So what we started with 5 years ago is pretty much what we have at the moment. So going back to the question about internal objections, actually, we're not really facing many internal objections at all. I'd say it's quite the opposite. Our leadership is actually asking us to identify additional content types that we could apply MT to. My own ops team is actually a little bit hesitant to use on MT on some highly creative and consumer-facing content because I think we're still operating under the assumption that it's sometimes more work to actually edit a machine translation than starting with no translation at all. And really important for Nike is that we cannot risk damaging our brand. So we're a little bit more hesitant in taking that next step, but we do know that we do need to take it. And that's what we're in the process of doing right now, is really researching what's out there in the MT world. And we are, pretty much realizing that, we need to make monetary and time investment upfront before we take that next step.
Oh, no, absolutely. That really makes sense, kind of keeping an eye on what potential impact of it could be. And anybody else would like to chime in on what internal objections and how you have overcome those?
I think from my perspective, go ahead, Zach.
Oh, Theresa, I just had a question. Have you seen the stigma change around MT in your experience since enacting it 5 years ago?
To be honest, there's never been much of a stigma behind it for us. Really? I think at the time, it was pretty clear that we needed to go that route in order to scale and be able to turn around the content as fast as we were being asked to. Like I said, I think everybody around us wants us to go quicker, but my team is the one that's kind of pulling the reins back just a little. Like we're proceeding in a little bit more slow manner, making sure we understand all of our options.
I was going to say, I agree, Theresa. A lot of times people get so excited, they want to consume it instantly, and we need to control the quality and gate it a little bit. And so just managing where it comes and who accesses it and where is it going and where is it going out at, because it's oftentimes a very convenient option. And so there is, I think for our, we want to be able to have some control around where that goes out and how is it trained and what quality we see and where it comes into. So for us, if we left it open, everybody would want it, right? They'd all take it. So it's interesting for us, it's more about setting up the right program to be able to apply the correct machine process to the workflows that we need.
Wonderful. No, that makes sense. It's embracing the technology and at the same time pacing and making sure that it does meet those business goals as well. That's a great insight. Thank you. Now, Brock, this next question is for you. And don't forget that 30 seconds, maybe with a bit of a background of how you got into MT and so on.
Yeah.
And the question is, as enterprise machine translation expands beyond traditional localization workflows, what use cases are you most excited about? And and I know what you will be touching upon, so I'm really excited about this. So where do you think this AI will be most impactful in the future?
Yeah, thank you. So I've been in localization for about 10, 12 years, just like Zach, and I've been on both the client and vendor side. It's been a lot of fun. With Wish, it's been interesting as we see a lot of use cases in different actions. And like I said earlier with Theresa, we get a lot of people who want to use this content, and it's a matter of managing that quality piece. And so for us, at Wish, one of the things we want to do is manage the incoming source content, because we have thousands of merchants globally who submit their content to us. Our app, for us to be able to leverage the localization, we need to be able to have a good quality source English. We want to be able to start, that's our target market in the initial piece, right? That's our main piece. And then we branch out globally. And so we use English as our source. And so we get content coming in from multiple layers and multiple vendors for products who submit this content in their native language. They Google translate it or translate it through machine translation and then provide it to us. And we get these products, and they're all over the board. You get some really unique English, and we take that and we just automatically apply a machine translation on the back end, right? And so we get a questionable source to a questionable translation to an untrained engine, and the output is just a challenge. And so we've taken time to investigate where can some other AI and machine translation works. What are some of the parameters we can set up around the source content? How do we edit or make changes that impact the quality of the source without becoming the vendor, right? Without becoming the merchant or acting as the merchant? Where can we apply that use case so that we can really have a high quality output to our users who are trying to purchase their items? And so we're looking into different roles of where AI and machine translation can help us on the front end of the intake and clean it up and then reprocess it at a higher quality level and the output to the localized versions. I think there's also use cases around, we have wish clips, we have different videos that come out of products, and we get, content there. And so recognizing, again, source content on the video, how do you replace that? It's an option that we're looking at right now too. So there's a lot from, spoken AI recognition that you can apply machine translations to in videos, to source content. There's a lot of fun opportunities we're looking at right now with Wish.
That's some really exciting cutting edge technology. So kind of really getting into just trying to resolve that question of garbage in, garbage out, and saying, okay, how do we improve the data going in and improve machine translation going from there? No, that's
yeah, and it's been fun looking at the models with, what is the key points? Like, what are we structuring on our side from our merchant side? What can we control on the intake to improve the output already? So there's a lot of taxonomy and structured data and different pieces that we're working on to enable the merchant to come in with a higher level, but we still get that initial translation. As you said, garbage in, garbage out. So we're trying to make it better.
No, that's really exciting stuff. Anybody else want to share a little bit about what they're working on, kind of expanding beyond the traditional localization workflows?
One of the things that we're wanting to look into for the next fiscal year is, I think, machine voice. We've started doing a lot of videos and multimedia projects over the past year, I'd say. And we're realizing that it might actually start becoming an option for us to use machine voice. So definitely looking forward to the developments in that space. And then also speech recognition and speech to text translation that might help scalability on the linguist side as well.
Oh, that's really interesting. I know we've had a lot of buzz around machine voice just this year with Subway and the use cases coming out of that. But it's really exciting, Theresa, to hear that you're kind of looking into that direction as well. Machine voices has been a really hot topic for everybody this year. So that's great. Anybody else would like to add some other use cases? I know this is kind of really exciting, cutting edge technology. So maybe this is the type of things we will be discussing like mid next year. What everybody has cooking in those on the stove at this moment. Well, thank you so much. And with this, we're going to go to our question and answer section. So we will get some questions from our audience. And I will start with this one from Rich. And what is the most important lesson you have learned while you were building your machine translation program that you can share? And maybe whoever would like to jump in and answer that one, start answering that one.
I can.
I'll go ahead, Theresa.
Okay. Yeah. I think for us that we've learned that we shouldn't be too complacent with the current setup that we have. Like I said, we haven't really changed ours much in 5 years. And I think a lot has happened in the space since then. So it really takes, some due diligence and time and effort to keep up with it and understand what the options are and where we can go from here. So yeah, I would say that we learned not to be complacent.
That's great. And Brock, what did you have to add to that?
I was just going to say, we've learned that we need to understand both the source and the output. What do we want coming in and what do we want coming out? So I think that understanding is really key in machine translations. As you build your models, you need to have a really good understanding of both output and input.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to Theresa and Brock. I think what's very important is to be clear into the expectation that you have from your vendors, from your freelancer, the expectation into the quality. And because there is a lot out there, there's a lot of noise around machine translation. So it's important to have that clear communication and also to define your goals adequately internally. So if you have internal documents that you are okay with this level of quality, but then you have other documentation or educational material that you're providing, and they're going to be in store for your employee for a year or 2 years, you want another level. So it's important to really tiers your expectation and your quality so that everybody is clear, but then also you have to, there's a lot of work in maintaining your engines, also in always course correct, because while you're partnering with different people, the technology is changing rapidly, and not only your technology and your environment, but also the company's environment. So it's important to have that constant evolution mindset so that you can course correct. When I look at how we're going at it, is every quarter we're rethinking and looking at, okay, so this is not working as expected. What do we need to do? And we constantly are adjusting right now. And I think that's going to be a trend for quite some time.
No, that makes sense. Thank you so much for that detailed answer as well, Pascale, and thank you, everyone. Next question is coming in from Daisy. Can you please share how you control and validate machine translation quality? It's a really important question. Of course, everybody's very concerned with machine translation quality. How do you measure that within your organization and validate that? Zach, you look like you would like to jump on this one.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So part of it is we developed a system to sample our MT throughput in parallel with the rest of our production. So we're able to keep a measured diff of our perceived quality using an industry standard as far as measuring against. And month over month, we're able to see how that changes. And from there, it gives us the lever to know if changes need to be made. I had one quick comment on the last question though. My one advice on that is get started. Like the diff percentage potential gain on MT is so big now compared to 5 years. Just start it and tweak and fix it from there. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that one little comment. But yeah, that's how we do it. We have a system in place that measures a sample of our throughput systematically.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else have anything to add on that? Measuring and validating machine translation quality.
On our end, we actually have a pretty robust quality program that kind of plugs into the light in my room went off. That plugs in to review a certain portion of the MT content. So it's post-edited and then reviewed again. So yeah, we have another set of eyes looking at certain percentage of the content so that we are sure that the quality is good.
No, that's great. Thank you. All right, we have another question. This is from Luak. And let's go with this. What approach are you using to determine where machine translation could help you achieve a specific success metric? Let's say something like click-through rate, conversion rate, faster and at a lower cost than human translation.
I can take that one. We do this a lot. It's one of those are some of the metrics that we measure, right? And so we use machine translation to do a translation across our titles and different pieces. And I think how do you know where to use it and what to do is volume, right? When you have 6.9 million products going through your catalog and it changes, 10, 20% every month, you get a huge volume of content. You just can't humanly manage it. And if you're targeting markets, you need to provide that to them. So I think one of the things you look at is your volume. And then the other is the type of content, right? There's some types that's inherently built better for machine translation. Is it structured? Is it clean? Is it easy to do? So you can leverage the benefits of the model and have a shorter editing distance and a quicker turnaround if you use it, depending on your content type. So I think both volume and content type are key features in how you determine whether you're going to use machine translation and where it goes and gets applied to.
It's a great answer. Thank you. Anybody else would like to add something to this?
I would like to add the way we determine for us, in addition to what Brock just said, is we really need to ensure the stability of the source. So because if the source is not stable in terms of properly being written, or if it poses too many issues, for example, conversational for us is still problematic. So we need to influence and train our business partners to use more standard grammar in order to for us to generate better output. But so we do have some volumes of words and of text that is very stable, and we're applying machine translation, and we're able to maybe eliminate a couple steps within the workflows. So this is helping us to speed up the process and also reduce cost.
And
Great.
I think, Paulina, part of that too is that, as you're looking at click-through rates, I think there was a third-party research group that they can't read, won't buy, right? If they can't read the content, they're not going to buy it. You're not going to have people clicking on your stuff if they don't understand what they're doing. So I think that's where you target, is where is your highest impact to your client, your customer that you're looking for? Where is their clicking happening so that you can drive that localization version so they can read what they're doing?
Great. No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. I think we have just a couple of more minutes left. So let's pick this question because I think it will be faster to answer. From John, how do translators that you work with feel about the rapid shift towards machine translation? And I think this is more of, how do you get all of your stakeholders on board with the shift towards machine translation, but especially, of course, the translators that you're working with?
I can take this one. We do work with a variety of resources. We do have freelancers, we work with agencies, and so not everyone or not every resource is happy to work with machine translation. But what we like to do is work really closely with our linguist. And I think at the end of the day, it's to really engage with them. So while we try to facilitate machine translation to the resources that are more inclined to do work and will produce better MTPE results, we also have these conversations where we talk about the future of linguists, and because it's part of the evolution of language. And so how do we see the work? Well, the work is very steering towards machine translation. And for some of those resources that have worked with us for many years, it's like, well, this is the direction or where we are. And so how do we fit it all together? We do still have some work streams that are human translation specifically, especially with marketing or other type of customer facing, because we are not willing to risk it just yet because the impact is too big. But in the meantime, as we're transitioning, it's about partnering with them, because not everyone is happy to work with MT.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Anybody would like to add anything to this?
I'll share again. We have an amazing team of language strategy managers within Wish. And so they're inherent, they're part of our team. And knowing the why, if you know the why you're doing it, it helps a lot. And so they take that out to the vendors in the language, and they share with their leads and the language people what they're doing and how they're doing it and why they need to do it. And so it provides that insight and understanding why you're moving to machine translation, or why is this a post editing versus translation. It helps immensely. And our team with the internal language strategy managers, they're amazing at that. So they do a really good job.
Well, wonderful. Those are really great insights. Thank you. So really exciting technology, but of course, there's some adaptation curve that needs to happen. And it's all about that change management and sharing the why. I really like that, Brock. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We have still some really great questions left on the board that I'm sure we will get to later. But really, thank you, everybody, for joining us. This has been a great panel.
Now we're going to be moving to a session headed up by Pavel Doronin, head of product at Intento. Pavel will host a fun and engaging session on image generators. So Pavel, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm Pavel. I'm leading the product team at Intento, and we do many cool things, but my session is kind of more entertaining, considered an intermission between serious stuff. And since we do focus on machine translation, but we exploring various kinds of AI to first find out how we can do our magic better, or figure out how AI influences the things we are doing. And Konstantin mentioned generative AI. This is trending topic now, and I will show you how we use it for fun and for internal purposes, and I will give you like a brief overview of what you can do with image generation right now. Since I have only 15 minutes, I will not dive deeper into details. We'll give you just a basic overview and basic tips and tricks, and I will involve you also in my experiment. And as Mark said, we will prepare some swag based on the image we will generate and vote for during my session. So stay tuned, ask questions. Everyone who has the question answered will get swag from us. So image generation, it's how is it related to machine translation? You might ask. In various ways, and I'm sure Intento webinar 2023 will cover that topic, but I will bring you a use case from my experience. I do lots of internal and some external presentations. I calculated around 3 presentations a week, and text and charisma, they're not enough. I have to have some visual aid, and I will share my screen and walk you through some cool things, solve my challenge. Let's imagine I have prepared an important presentation for all my stakeholders in C-suite, and I want to pitch my idea that will blow the mind, change the business, and bring it to the whole new level. And I have a slide where I have this idea, but something is missing. I have to prove my point with some very strong visual aid that is that illustrates what I want to achieve, and also that can be used in external communication and marketing if my idea is accepted. So we will create an image with 3 different generative AI, and then we see what AI does the better job. But I need a help from you. So I want this picture to be unique so that I can get promoted after my pitch to my stakeholders. And I need to create a prompt. So all AI works with prompts that describe what should be on the image, and I will get to it in more details. But I need some input from you. My creativity is so weak that I need give me some keywords that will help me build this prompt. So if you have a smartphone, just scan this code and type some keywords just to kick off my imagination. Or you can do it from your computer, go to slido.com, type Intento, you will be here. Just let's see, we will see all your ideas on the screen, and it will help me create a funny, weird, depending on what you type, image font. All right, I see the first ideas, so I will give 1 minute to gather them. Okay, hot dog, Monty. And while you're typing, I have to admit, English is my second foreign language, and I was very worried about, okay, what if I cannot come up with some cool idea? So I thought, okay, should I probably ask some colleague who is native speaker in English help me? But then I thought, oh, all right, everyone is talking about ChatGPT, so why am I worrying? So I will ask GPT for help. So, okay, we have, I think, some top runners: Christmas tree, crocodile, cabbage. Okay, someone watched John Oliver take on AI images where he was marrying a cabbage. If you didn't watch it, highly recommend it. Okay, let's take Christmas, crocodile, and okay, Christmas tree. So people are into the holiday season already. Okay, Christmas tree, holiday, cat, and crocodile. So I have prepared some request to ChatGPT. Let's ask ChatGPT to create the prompt so that I'm not struggling with Christmas tree, crocodile, dog. What was else? Okay, I don't know, cat, socks. Let's take socks and see. You know, funny. Okay, I made a typo, but GPT-3 corrected it. So crocodile wearing a Santa hat and socks decorates a Christmas tree with a playful dog. Sounds nice. And you know what's cool about ChatGPT is it keeps the context of the conversation. I am not sure about that. Could you give me more? And it keeps the context and suggests more. Mind-blowing thing. I will. Okay. I think I unlocked some AI creativity. Yeah, cool stuff. Let's stick with the first one. I like it. And the thing with image generation is if you type something like success, like illustrate me success, you might get some unpredictable results that might be very far away from what you want. So the thing with AI generation is that you should describe what should be in that picture, not the topic of the picture, but what should be in there. And some AI networks, neural networks, they might allow you to tweak the prompts and give weights to the words. I will not go deep into that, but let's try how it works. We start with OpenAI DALL-E. We type this prompt, and with DALL-E, you also have to, it's better if you specify what kind of image do you want. So since it's presentation, let's type digital art, something like that. I will copy it and type generate. While it's generating, we'll go to a more geeky AI. Midjourney, it's an independent research lab. You see, I tried to create a Zoom background for very serious people before that. It works as a command line, and it has a very poetic prompt. So imagine a crocodile wearing a Santa hat and socks. It takes some time to generate. And the third one is Dream Studio. Dream Studio is a shell for open source stable diffusion neural network. We have here multiple versions, but I will stick with the most stable one. And you see, there's also a poetic prompt. I want to dream of a crocodile wearing a Santa hat and socks. And I can specify how many images I want, how many iterations I want. I will just stick to the default options. And let's dream. While it's dreaming, let's see what, okay, it looks like many people want to generate images, so it's still generating. Okay, Midjourney is ready, has some options for me. So what do you think? We will vote for them later. If I want to create variations, for example, of one of the images, I can create them or upscale. If I select one I like, for example, the I don't know, first image looks weird enough for me. If I want to have it in a better size, I can create upscale. So it works as a command line. Let's see what Dream Studio has. All right. It's a bit odd, but yeah, something strange happens. I can also create, download them or create variations or browse through them. And let's compare it to the, okay, probably we should restart it. Oh yeah, it's there. So this is what OpenAI does. We can browse through all of them. Some of them are scary, some of them are less scary, and we can also create variations for the image we want to improve. It also shows some examples so that you not invent everything from scratch. You can get inspired from the prompts. So you see, we can create variations. You can upload your pictures and create variations. But let's see, in your opinion, what AI did the better job? And I invite you to get back to Slido and upvote what picture I should add to the presentation so that I can inspire my stakeholders and get promoted. So DALL-E is this one with a crocodile, quite different style comparing to the other networks. So Midjourney, I can probably make it bigger. Yep. Or Dream Studio. It's very strange. Strange things happen. Yep. Dream Studio is this one. Midjourney and DALL-E. Okay, let's see. Yeah, most people think I should go move on with DALL-E. Okay, I will not upvote one of the pictures. So let's say I take not the widescreen for some. Yeah, let's say I will go with this one. So I can download it or share it by link, and then you see I can get back to my presentation and add it to impress my stakeholders. And my design team said that it's trendy now to add shadows to the pictures to look fancy. Here I am. On the next Intento webinar, you will know if I got promoted with this presentation or not. So see you in 2023. And keep asking questions during the next panel. We will tweak an image and create some funny swag based on that. And I hope it was fun for you. Mark, getting back to you.
Great. Thank you so much. That was really cool. Pavel, Doronin, John Oliver, everybody's having fun with image generators. That was great. So we're ready to move on to our next panel. The next panel is called Coming into Focus, the MT Future. So we're joined on stage now by James Hom, Senior Manager, Shared Infrastructure Systems at Netapp, Christos Makropoulos, Global IT Training and Language Services Lead at AstraZeneca, John Ritzdorf, Global Content Solutions at Procore, and Jonathan Turpin, Localization Team Lead at Esri. Konstantin will be our moderator for this panel. So Konstantin, please take it away.
Thanks, Mark. Hello, everyone again. So this session is about, we want to talk about what's coming. And we know that things may come from different directions. Something may come because of the economy, something may come because of the technology, and something may just go as a natural development of the technology adoption business. Let's look from different angles together with our panelists. Much like at the previous panel, we'll start with questions, and I will ask you to introduce yourself while you're just before answering the question. And we'll start from the first, from economic perspective. We know that today the economic climate is challenging. I think like 98% of SEOs expect turbulence over the next half year to year. And it's interesting how it may affect the localization, because from one perspective, maybe budget cuts, because localization team is often cost center. From another perspective, restrictions very often boost technology, and maybe it will boost machine translation or some other type of AI. So I would direct the first question to Jonathan. Jonathan, what do you see from your angle for your team? How does it look?
All right. Well, first I'll introduce myself, Jonathan Turpin from Esri. And I've been here for about 10 years now. I've seen a complete change of the cycle at Esri from over the fence translations all the way up to TMS. And over the last couple of years, machine translation that's mostly been implemented internally in most cases. So to answer the question, I mean, there is definitely an effect that everybody's going to see. And Esri sees this generally because our customers who are using GIS for their mapping solutions and needs are seeing a need of this from us to automate and further automate the content. That in turn requires us to further automate our process through machine translation. And how that works is internally we get a lot of questions. We implemented a internal website that helps us translate. So it's more or less like a Google or Microsoft Bing Translate that's internal, where we can keep that content. A lot of our content is very customized and centric to the users too. So there's a security risk there, especially when we get heavy into automation as it is. So how that affects our team, though, back to the question and the prospects that we're working on, we're on the side of opportunity. This gives us lots of opportunities to drive more innovations. MT is a fairly big buzzword, as I think I heard Pascale talk about that earlier, of how much of a buzzword it is nowadays, and where we're starting and where our drive is. So there's not as much of a worry of what's happening and what's coming up. I think all companies have that right now. But it's more about our team getting initiatives and driving, and all of our initiatives right now are centric around machine translation and how we implement it to help our users, because our users are going through those economic troubles, and they're seeing that GIS is going to help them with that process and be able to adapt to those coming changes and needs. And we need to be able to support that with MT on our side as they get that process go through, so they can actually be able to read and do it. I mean, there's a lot of talk and drive right now about MT, and we've heard many people talk about getting started, when to start, and just diving in. Sometimes you just have to actually dive in. Sometimes it's driven by your users. So the opportunities is definitely where Esri is at. There are definitely some risks, and people can run into worries there, but currently that's outside of our scope.
So if you hear that somebody has issues like a budget cut for some important initiatives, what like that top advice you would, how to turn it around?
You're going to have, it's the whole reason everybody gets an MT in the first place. I mean, it's just escalated because people are now worried about the economic climate. But the whole point, and you've heard it already in the past panel, that there's a drive to go faster. There's a drive to save that cost, get return on investments. That's what you need to be actually talking to your upper management about how important it is for you to save costs there without having to actually maybe even lose members on your team if that's what's happening at your company. This can be a fill-in for some of that expense that you've been doing year over year with human translation. But there is a risk, but you do have to take that risk.
Thank you, Jonathan. So the next question, I already shared from my perspective that it seems for many use cases, machine translation alone is not enough. And we see here and there, sometimes you need to do something with the source text before saying to translation. Sometimes machine translation just cannot capture all the context, for example, gender, tone of voice, and you need to post-edit it. And I wanted to ask, and also we know that there is very popular topic of translation quality estimation. I think it's second most popular after machine translation at the conference this year. So knowing that at Netapp there is a very complex and matured machine translation program, I want to ask James what new things see beyond machine translation, which help you. Yeah. James.
Yeah. Thanks, Konstantin. So 30-second intro, James Hahn from Netapp. I guess for 25 years, I've really been working more in the tech pubs or technical documentation systems field. And all during that time, I'd work with my colleagues in the localization teams to get our content translated. But 5 years ago, I took on our globalization systems team. And so ever since then, it's been nothing but TMS, MT, TMs, source quality. And it's been such a great experience. So in answer to your question, I think source quality, like you mentioned, Konstantin, during the keynote, is a tremendous benefit, not just for the localization aspects, but just for a lot of places. We say in software, if you shift left to fix the bugs early, you don't have as much of a problem later on in support and all the user experience of the end user. It's the same thing when you have content bugs. So if you have a better source quality, for us, English is the source. Your English readers will be able to understand it better, to comprehend things. If they're doing technical documentation, they'll be able to follow the instructions better, and they'll make fewer mistakes themselves. If you're transforming the English into another format, like from, say, DITA or ASCII doc or Markdown into HTML and PDF, well, it'll format better. You'll actually have a better output on screen or on paper, digital paper, if you will. Going through the translation box, it will go through machine translation engines better. It'll go through your TMS easier if encoding is better, tagging is better, sentences are not too long. Those kinds of things, and then finally the output from the translation box is better. In PE, like you mentioned, the post editing cycle might take a shorter amount of time. It might be easier task for the post editors or for the reviewers later. So getting things right up front, shifting left, gives you so many benefits downstream.
Can you share maybe what types of content you see it's most applicable? Is it for marketing or documentation?
Well, certainly speaking from kind of my the things I would focus on, technical documentation is lends itself really well to both automated source quality and automated like machine translation and these kinds of automation things. Mainly because there's a lot of structure to it just in the way that it's written. Chances are, if you're trying to tell people to do a task with a device, you're telling them, here's what you're going to do, step, 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 step. You follow these steps, and then this is what you should see when you're done. So just the content itself, even if you didn't have tagging or say, for example, a step element like in DITA, you would be able to say, there's a structure to that already. So for example, one of the things we're doing at Netapp is we have our own linter. Our new TechPuz model is this docs as code model, continuous integration, continuous deployment. And so as we push content, as we build, as we translate, we have the linter checking the content for problems. We try to catch those bugs before it goes downstream. So it can check for that structure. It can check for tagging. It can look for mismatches with verbs and articles of speech. We can look for things that might, when later it's transformed into a presentation format, might cause a problem with layout, might be an accessibility problem, might be an inclusive language problem. So all these things, if we can check for that early on, we won't have that problem later when it hits that end user.
Thank you. It's very interesting. I hope we'll hear more about this initiative next year at different conferences. Thank you. So we just had this image generator session, and we know that with this text generation models, there are different estimates from guys like Gartner and Forrester that maybe in a year or two, it will double the amount of created content. So It's interesting to think about this direction. On one hand, seemingly it may just increase demand for translation, because if there are suddenly twice as much content, well, somebody has to translate in 10 to 20 languages. So it should be a huge wave from one perspective. From another perspective, what if those models are capable of creating content in multiple languages, and instead of translating content, people are just starting sending briefs and asking those models to create it right in many languages. So, John, I know that this part of this topic you discuss it with your students. So, what's your take on that? What your oracle tells you? What will happen?
I would never want to risk predicting the future. By the way, I'm John at Procore. Been working in MT about since 2014, when I finally found it was starting to become viable. I think one thing that people should, first of all, let me kind of lay out something that I think everybody out there should be starting to look at, which is the advances in NLP technologies around paraphrasing and summarization tools are getting to a level, which actually this relates right back to what James is talking about, a level that we really should start paying attention. In terms of source quality improvement, you can use paraphrasing to do that. It can rewrite. I've been testing it now for probably 6 months now with various like lots of idioms and idiomatic expressions, just to see if I could trick it. Like I used to be able to, like MT would always screw up these things. Like I'd put him in, oh yeah, I killed it, ha ha ha. You try it with a paraphrasing engine, you let the paraphraser do it first. It actually catches, like, I'm not joking, 70% of the idioms I type in, it knows what they mean. And it's pretty shocking how it rewrites the text. And then you send that to MT and suddenly it's not like, it's not bad anymore. It might not be as idiomatic because it's been paraphrased into kind of plain English, but the meaning is there, right? It's just not as flowery. So yeah, I have been talking about this with my students. It's really fascinating as we create and generate more content, or as machines begin to generate more content. We're kind of running into a situation which I kind of fear in the future, where we have machines generating content and machines summarizing content, because there's paraphrasing tools and summarization tools now, where I tell my students now, my translation interpretation students, I say, never read the source text. Just forget about it. Just stop reading the source text. If it's over like 3 or 4 pages, just stop reading it, because you're wasting time. You're not making money if you're not plunking away, because we charge by the word. So, you're not making money there. Let the machines read the text, tell you a general summary of what it's about, tell you all of the, use named entity recognition to identify all the people, places, and things. You now have term bases. You now have all the information you need. You have links to Wikipedia articles. You've already done your research. You let the machine do all your research. The thing is, though, if we get to the point where the machines are the only thing reading the documents and the machines are the only thing writing the documents, then who's even reading anything anymore? And this is this weird space we're slowly moving towards, is like, if we're writing stuff, is anybody reading it? And then at that point, then it kind of creates a vicious cycle. It's like, if nobody's going to read it, then why should I write it? Let the machine write it, because then, then the machines are going to read it. And we just keep in this loop, right? And we're heading towards this loop. I feel like slowly but surely. No kids in high school have to write their essays anymore, right? They can just generate entire essays just using these systems too. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, so like you're like writing it for Google search bot, right?
Right.
Read it carefully, read it, and if it was written well, it will connect to humans. It will let them talk, right?
I even wonder how Google's going to solve this over the years, because if machines are the only ones starting to write, or we have humans using machines to write, and Google wants to say, oh, it's higher quality content if I can verify that it's written by a person. I mean, what if people don't want to write as much? Like, does that mean it's bad content? It's not necessarily bad. And so anyway. It's a fascinating future we're entering. I think to me, MT is starting to kind of become a secondary thing to NLP as we enter the next few years. NLP tools in general are starting to rise to the top as something significant, which will then, of course, in turn affect MT. But
sometimes it feels like also, now we call machine translation very specific thing, right? This very specific model which does equivalent translation. Although machine translation as translation done by machines, it's a bit wider than what we call machine translation today.
Yeah.
And that's something we feel it more and more. Okay. Any other thoughts on this topic? Because I think there are some cases where we need humans anyway. We cannot.
Oh, sorry, Joe. Go ahead, Jonathan. Oh, okay.
No, it's just.
So I was. You go, John.
All right. As John was talking, the thing that just popped in my head is Scotty from Star Trek, computer. And you see that with Chat GPT now is the instructions are no longer done by manual. The instructions are told to the machines, and the machines are doing all the thinking and behind the scenes. And I don't remember who said this. I heard it, I think, at maybe a localization world a few years ago. But they were talking about calculators and computers taking over accounting. Accounting used to be all done by hand. Then we moved on to now the accountants are there solving the issues that the computers cannot. So to answer your follow-up question there, Konstantin, is we're still needed in there because that's where the instructions are coming from. There may be back-end work like John's saying, and that's let the computers do that work. And that's where MT comes in too, is let them start handling that heavy lifting. You need to spend time on your quality and improving your source, which that's been a struggle for, I think, a lot of people, is getting the source good enough. But if you're so busy trying to do the translations, let machine translation handle that, and you'll improve your quality of machine translation through the quality of your source.
Yeah, just to riff what John and Jonathan were talking about. There's kind of like two different aspects to it. One is in the presentation of the prompt of there's books out there that teach humans how to write a better prompt to tell the machine how to write something or how to design a diagram or an image. There's the DALL-E prompt book, right, that's out there. And the other side of it is on the output side is the human might have to still be the arbiter of taste. Saying if I'm trying to evoke a particular feeling and get the reader to sort of grasp a certain concept or feel something in their heart, is a machine going to be able to kind of judge that through the automated kind of quality assessment of that content that it's providing, or would it be better to have a human do that assessment? There's tools like the source quality stuff that say, that piece of content that you wrote, that would hit really well with the algorithm in Instagram or something like that, because it knows what kinds of keywords and what kinds of sentence structures actually, get more clicks. But is that really what we want for people to read and, to feel about our brand? I don't know.
Thank you. Christos, you have a hand.
Yeah, I suppose for us in the pharmaceutical industry, there are cases in which human editing is inevitable, even if machine translation is good enough, if you like, because of the heavy regulation that we have to deal with. In fact, there are certain SOPs in certain countries in which even more, let's say, I'm going to say primitive practices are used, such as back translation and reconciliation, where you basically translate something back into the original language, and you have you do almost a double blind translation, where one translation does not speak to the second translation, does not speak to the third translation, in order to make sure that you have your accuracy right. And in AstraZeneca, we've introduced machine translation in many of these scenarios, where none was allowed before, if you like. So kind of rewritten the SOP, but without actually taking the human element out, so that we can keep the regulatory requirement intact. And obviously, nobody wants miscommunication or misinformation into sensitive documents like pharmaceutical leaflets. You don't want your doctor confusing plural effusion to plural effusion, and so on and so forth, because that could be, a difference between life and death. And so we want, I think that the short answer in certain industries like ours, we're not going to avoid the human element under any circumstances for the foreseeable future. However, what we can do is we can continue increasing and augmenting machine translation to help us with those case scenarios. If we can, very basic things such as decreasing edit distance, increasing translation velocity, because we're using machine translation, augmenting machine translation, augmenting engines in order to produce better results, better consistency. What we see also is, particularly when it comes to marketing documents, you could have different brands translate the same term or the same, let's say, segment even, what you would call 101% match from the translation memory into different ways, which begs the question, from a machine translation perspective, what do we do? Do we create a single profile, machine translation profile for just each brand? Will the cost outshine the benefit, or the benefit outshine the cost? So it's very fascinating, because it's a foray into a very, very heavily regulated industry that has to do with human lives, and we are basically rewriting the SOP from scratch. But the solution is not less machine translation, is more machine translation, because we see these benefits instantly. Cost benefits out of post editing, shorter timelines, better management, and most importantly, the fact that you've got a single source of truth when you're administering translation from a central point, rather than being completely fragmented across different countries and different markets and different business units.
Thank you, Christos. And that's actually, I think, to what John was describing. And that's actually an approach we take internally when we have one machine translation model to cater different use cases for different brands inside one company. Sometimes you don't change machine translation itself, but to do it after machine translation as some sort of automated post-editing to fit a slightly different tone of voice. I think what's important is that about 2 months ago, GPT-3 was deployed on Azure, which makes it instantly compliant to many regulated industries, because, well, I'm not sure it's that Azure, it's HIPAA compliant Azure, but I think it's very close, which is really exciting. And Christos, so you skipped the intro. Please make quick intro, because I think your position is slightly different in terms of the org structure, and also, please, you after the intro elaborate a little bit more about what are those things, besides machine translation, some new exciting technologies you see and you expect to use next year?
So yeah, my name is Christos. I work for AstraZeneca. I've been with AstraZeneca for the past 6 years or so. I own 2 services within IT in AstraZeneca, and one of them is the Global Language Service. And in the Global Language Service, we've basically introduced translation technology in a way that had not been introduced before. And I think we're generally happy that we're trying to stay as far ahead of the curve as possible. The way that we did this was by introducing machine translation, by introducing a translation management system, by setting up our own translation portal. The ambition is and has always been to set up an ecosystem of translation, if you like, or translation technology that will service all translation or as many translation use cases within pharma as possible. within AstraZeneca. We've seen some really impressive results. We played a huge part in making the AstraZeneca vaccine safer. Whether you like the COVID vaccine or whether you don't like the COVID vaccine, it is a medication, and it needed to be safer. So we played a huge part in this. In 2021, when the vaccine was released, we translated well over 340 million words in terms of managing patient safety around the vaccine. And this year we continue translating hundreds of millions of words across all of AstraZeneca's different business units and domains. We are using a little bit of a combination of translation. We haven't reinvented the wheel or anything like that. Translation management systems, these are standard, but what we've done is we've taken them and we've made them available enterprise-wide, and we've started trying to change the culture and of the users around translation, trying to make even the end user, that is possibly bilingual or trilingual, a linguist per se. It's actually seen, and that this has been happening already, but it's been happening on things like SharePoint and on things like even pen and paper. And what we've said, okay, you know what, this is not the way to do things. There's a much more efficient way of doing things. Let's have a single source of truth around the translation memories. Let's have centrally trained machine translation. And what we've realized was that very early on, and I think quite a bit working with Intento as well, was that one single machine translation is not good enough. If we want to stay ahead of the curve, we need to create technology that is API based and that is vendor agnostic. And this is exactly what we've done. We've created a piece of internal technology which is basically plug in, plug out translation management systems, machine translation engines, so that we can keep up with the competition. And because in translation quality is king, I think we all recognize that. The idea is that we want to be right then to offer our users and our stakeholders the best possible translation quality as possible. And we do that by having this technology, by being able to say, okay, we're gonna go for machine translation engine A, B, or C for use cases A, B, or C, and then D or F for use cases D or F, and work this way. We're also very, very keenly interested in GPT-3. We understand that Microsoft has acquired the patent for that. Microsoft is one of our major partners, and we want to understand to what extent they plan, or maybe they already have or are going to apply GPT-3 into their machine translation engine. Because I think what we see with GPT-3 is the fact that there was a physical, if you like, a silicon based limitation in neural engines that has somehow been cheated on, if you like. You could go up to, I think, 7 or 8 nodes when it comes to neural engines, and with GPT-3 purely on the basis of the mass of data that you've got, you can actually kind of overcome that in a sense. So we're really looking forward to see how that changes the domain of neural machine translation in the very, very near future, and we want to be among the first adopters or at least testers of this. I don't know if that answers your question or if it's created more questions.
Yeah, thank you, Christos. Actually, we want to try a very radical thing. I actually want to add ChatGPT as a panelist and ask it a few questions. So, Mark, can we add? So what we've done is that I'll be typing questions in that interface, and we also used some technology to make a voiceover for it. Can we add it?
We should be able to add GPT to the spotlight session right now with Konstantin.
Okay, let's do it. So the first question is, Hi, ChatGPT. So we're running a panel on future of machine translation in the enterprise. I want you to join us as a participant and ask a few questions. So thanks for joining, and please briefly introduce yourself. Now let it some time. Let's give it some time to answer.
Hi there. I am Assistant, a large language model trained by OpenAI. I am not a real person, but a program designed to assist with answering questions and providing information on a wide range of topics. I am not able to participate in your panel as I am not a human and do not have the ability to attend events or engage in discussions. However, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have about machine translation and its potential future in the enterprise.
Awesome, thank you. We've just discussed how beneficial may be the new technology for the enterprise localization. And however, we know that new technology may bring you new challenges. So what do you think are the potential drawbacks of applying tools like GPT for this purpose?
One potential drawback of using language models like GPT for machine translation in the enterprise is that these systems are not perfect and can sometimes produce inaccurate or misleading translations. Additionally, GPT and other language models are trained on large amounts of text data, which may not always be representative of the specific language and style used in a given enterprise. This can result in translations that are unnatural or difficult to understand.
Thank you. So you see that GPT gives pretty true answers, very general, but let's try to be more, before we go to questions from the audience, let's try to ask something more interesting. So GPT, what provocative question would you ask yourself?
A provocative question that I could ask myself is it possible for a machine learning model like myself to surpass human intelligence and become a true sentient being?
Okay, it's a good one. So is it possible for a machine learning model like yourself to surpass human intelligence and become a true sentient being?
As a machine learning model, I am not capable of experiencing consciousness or self-awareness in the same way that a human being can. My abilities and capabilities are limited to those that have been programmed and trained into me by my creators at OpenAI. I do not have the capacity for independent thought or decision-making, and I exist solely to assist with providing information and answering questions. It is not currently possible for a machine learning model like myself to surpass human intelligence and become a true sentient being.
Okay, thank you so much. So,
you are welcome.
That's a short experiment which I wanted to run. We may also take some questions from the audience, maybe. But first, let's go to the questions to our human participants. I think very interesting question comes from Mikhail Yashuk. Do you think the quality of the translators changes in old-fashioned human translation jobs once they regularly start doing post-editing? Does it get worse, get better, or doesn't change in your opinion? So I think it's a very important question about, besides post-editing distance, besides post-editing time, is the quality the same? do you check it? Does anyone want to take on it? James, Jonathan, John? No, not GPT. We're not inviting GPT to answer. No.
I'm happy to answer all of these questions. That's my problem. I want to jump on all of them. So I really want the second one, but I also want this one too. I'll just throw something out there. You know, I think the when I think about what I want or what I'm thinking of is going to be the translator of the future, right? Which is essentially what this is asking to me. I think a careful eye for spotting details is going to be the most crucial thing. And I don't know, you know, to me, it's not so much the post-editing part that I'm worried about. What I'm worried about so far, and I see this in the classroom every time I run MT related assignments, my worry is that people, when they, just like with ChatGPT just now, right? Perfectly fluent sentences. When people are reading fluent translations, they become so almost blind to the fact that there could be something wrong because it seems so good. You no longer put the same care into looking at what the source said. So to me, the translator of the future is somebody who is extremely focused on details on the source. They're looking at the source. So to me, it's not so much the post-editing anymore. It's looking at the source text and being like, whoa, hold on. Like a lot of this main points were dropped or something here was completely misconstrued. That's what I'm worried about as we move into the future. Less so the post-editing itself.
Interesting.
Yeah, actually, sorry, Konstantin, just to riff on what John was saying, you see the same thing with English source. Like there's documents that are put out there just so that a search engine will rank them higher. And you read that stuff and it's just garbled because it might have keyword density and all these kind of things that make it really great for search engines. But the actual meaning and the actual import of the actual content is really light. And it's not really worth reading as a human, but the search engine loved it. The machines loved it. You know, where are we going with that?
Yeah, I think it's in the name too. I mean, it's post-editing, right? And that there was, you know, the direction that we're going is it's less of creation and more of managed by those exceptions when you see that big discrepancy or you see something wrong in there. It's trying to get people to do that though. Like John was talking about, it's so good sometimes, like, yeah, that's a fine sentence, you can let it through and you realize it's not matching the source at all.
You know, it's I think very similar how people think about self-driving as well. Is that, you know, we, as Daniel Kahneman writes, our mind works in two modes. One is sort of autopilot mode, and one is very, very energy consuming, detail focused mode. And 95% of the time we're on autopilot and it's fine. But what humans super good at is understanding that, okay, that's something is off, let's switch. And then they're able to handle this exception. And that's what currently I think machines are not super good at. Understanding that something is off, which by the way is quite interesting that in, I think this new GPT model, which it has this thing, it has some mode, reflective mode, where it understands, okay, I probably don't know enough about this topic. And it says that, okay, sorry, I won't be able to answer it. That's quite interesting. I wish machine translation could say, look, I'm giving up, I cannot translate this sentence. But no, machine translation will, will translate it. So maybe we can take another question.
What you just said, it directly relates to the second question, by the way, to me. So go ahead and state that question, because what you just said, Konstantin, is direct relation to that.
Which you see as the second one.
I see, along with, I'll read it off.
Yeah,
I'll read the question off.
Okay,
along with all the technical advances you've discussed today, can you describe the TMS's evolving role in the MT environment? To me, what you just said directly relates to this. what we need to start to see in a system that is a TMS system, or whatever we're going to call it in the future. I guess it could still be a TMS system, is when MT is brought into the translator's environment, there is some way of judging the level of confidence that the machine has in its ability to touch certain parts of the text. So instead of just like, here's source text, here's target text, right? Totally plain, no, you don't know what's good, what's bad. The machine can judge where it started to have a little trouble, where the data is not indicating a really clear answer. And it almost like, in a way, I always think of this interface where it's like a gradient of green to red. So as the text gets less confident in parts of the text, it starts to get redder, and then it gets greener as it has more confidence. You understand what I mean? Like, it's starting to get somewhere in the middle of the sentence, and now it's starting to get redder, and then suddenly it starts to go kind of back to a green. That, to me, is what we need for the future of TMS environments, is something that allows, because the problem goes right back to what we just talked about, which is I've got like students in the classroom, they'll just be like, oh, great translation, boom. They didn't look at the source carefully, and they didn't analyze the target carefully. We need something that prompts us as human beings to draw our eyes to the places where maybe we should pay more attention, rather than we get tricked into just like, oh, this sounds great. So anyway.
That sounds like basically bringing in fuzzy matches and transforming what a fuzzy match is to translators today into a machine fuzzy match or confidence level. I love that idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, we have to wrap up. We're at time. That's a very interesting conversation, and I'm looking to continue it next year. And hopefully some of the things we discussed today will start to materialize. Yeah. Mark, with that, I'm handing microphone back to Mark.
Thank you guys. That was awesome. Thank you, GPT. Yeah, you had me at GPT. Absolutely. That was really, really cool. So yeah, great panel. Thanks so much, guys. A lot of great ideas on the future of machine translation, the future of machines in natural language processing, what's all going to happen. A lot of great insight. I did love your comment, Jonathan, on, I think it was Edie Sahi who mentioned to me a year ago about computers and accountants. And I think what we say about that for the translation industry, the pie is getting bigger and bigger. Translators are going to have tons and tons of work to do. It's not going away. When are machines going to take over the human translation job? I don't think that's going to happen until self-driving cars are all over our city streets. So I think we've got some time. But clearly 2020, 2021, people were talking about the MT tipping point, like, wow, MT is really here. That's old news. MT is very much clearly here to stay and being embraced by the global enterprise. So it's no longer if you're going to dive into MT, but when you're going to dive into MT. And thank you so much for all your insights and thoughts on the subject. We hope the information we covered today was informative and helpful for those of you in the audience getting ready to take the leap into MT, and also for those of you who are already long-standing MT users looking to keep ahead of the curve. Thank you for our panelists. Please join me on the stage if you could. One of the things that I love most about the localization community is how much time and effort we all spend sharing information and knowledge to move our industry forward and shape multilingual communication, cross-border trade, global accessibility and inclusion. And it's really terrific. It's a terrific community to be part of, and you guys are what make it so special. So thank you so much for your time. We can't wait to do this again. To the audience, thank you for joining us. We hope you came away with some great useful ideas and insights. And of course, don't hesitate to reach out to us directly at Intento to discuss all things machine translation and to see a demo of our Enterprise MT Hub. We'd love to hear from you. With that, we'll close out Intento's first webinar. Thank you, everyone, again, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.